Doubt is a fundamental part of being a skeptic, but the religious, they never can, at least not for their own religion. At least they never can for long. Rarely has it ever been made so obvious, but that's what we're here for today, so stay tuned. We're going to do a Mike Licona video of sorts, at least it's on his channel, but it's actually just a book promotion masquerading as an interview. It also shows exactly why the religious go wrong in studying their own beliefs, and that's the real takeaway from all of this. These people aren't interested in truth, no matter what they say. This is going to prove that conclusively, so let's go take a look.
Hi, this is Dr. Kurt Jaris. I'm here with my friend Dr. Mike Licona, and we're talking about his new book, Jesus Contradicted: Why the Gospels Tell the Same Story Differently.
So this is just a scam to get people to buy his book, right? Big surprise there. You notice you never see me selling anything on this channel, right? No books, no t-shirts, no nothing. I virtually never even talk about my Patreon, and hardly anyone ever subscribes anyhow. I'm not doing this to make a buck, whereas the religious, clearly they are. So let's keep that in mind as we go on. Mike is a con artist, just like all the rest. I trust no one is at all surprised.
Mike, when you were dealing with doubts about the Gospels and the differences between them, there was what you call the Baltimore call. Was that a call to ministry that you felt? What was that?
Before we get to Mike, though, everyone ought to have serious doubts about religion. All religion. No religion ought to be ever taken on faith, but isn't that what religions want you to do? Somehow I figure Mike will go there, but I'm going to point out just how idiotic it all is up front. Then Mike can say whatever he wants to say so he can, sell more books. No, I'm not going to let that go. Faith is just the excuse that the gullible give themselves when they have no actual evidence to support their beliefs. That's all it is. Even in the Bible it says so in Hebrews 11:1. If you have evidence, you don't need faith. If you have to rely on faith, you don't have evidence. It's that simple. There is no evidence for the crap in the Bible, at least for the stuff that they're really talking about. Was there a Jerusalem? Sure. Can you prove anything about Jesus? Absolutely not. Once you get to the supernatural claims, they're all off in La La Land somewhere. This is not impressive, and anyone who falls for it is a moron. Let's not be morons, shall we? So back to Mike we go.
Well, it was, I believe it was 1989, and my wife and I, we were living in Baltimore at the time. And I was just having doubts about my faith. I had not ever been interested in Christian apologetics. I just didn't feel like I needed it, but then I needed it.
Now, I don't want to put words into Mike's mouth, but I have run into Christians who said that before. Apologetics became the bandage that covered over all the problems with their beliefs, instead of trying to find out if they were actually true in the first place, as I did. It's doubling down on the insistence that it's all just got to be true, because that's what's emotionally comforting. It's defending something that you can't prove is true in the first place, and that's not a good thing. So we'll get back to his story, but this is just an introduction to his lying for the Lord, and that led to him signing several ironclad binding statements of faith, where if he disagreed with Christianity publicly, at least in ways that his employers didn't approve of, he lost his job. And yes, he did lose his job once by flapping his lips. No credible organization hobbles your brain by threatening your employment if you disagree. So let's get back to the story already in progress.
At one point, I started having questions, and I remember calling Gary Habermas. He calls it the Baltimore call.
That was your mistake right there. Actually, your mistake was signing an agreement in the first place, because I don't have any respect for anybody who would even consider doing that. But that is what that is. Gary's in the same situation. He's also signed the ironclad profession of faith, and he can't dare break it or he's out on his ear. So he called another lunatic to say that he had doubts about the things that he believed irrationally. And I guess we're supposed to be surprised that Habermas didn't say, well, maybe you should have doubts. Or maybe you should go and check it all out for yourself and follow the evidence to a rationally derived conclusion. Because somehow I doubt that's what Gary Habermas had to say. I guess we can't know for sure, but back to the story.
I said, Doc, look, a lot of scholars don't think Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John wrote the Gospels. And if they didn't write the Gospels, then how do we know we can trust anything in them? And this is really bothering me. It's rocking my faith.
As it should. Because as we've learned more about these silly tales, the view that Christianity has any validity to fall back on at all has really fallen apart. This is what they really want to be true, not what they can demonstrate actually is. This is pretty much where every single conversation with the religious falls apart, at least recently. How do you know what you pretend to know? Not do you believe it? How have you put any of it to the objective test to see if it stands up to any kind of objective rigor? And they have no answers to that, do they? They just really want to believe. Every single one of them makes excuses and runs away. They have nothing concrete that they can lean against as proof that what they believe is true. They don't care about that at all. That's when they change the subject or make a quick exit stage right. Kind of pathetic, isn't it?
And he listened to me patiently, and then he said, Mike, did Jesus rise from the dead?
Not that we have any evidence for. That is a statement of faith, not demonstrable fact. You can't even prove that a real person named Jesus ever existed. This is when the standard whining comes out. Well, you just have to believe that Jesus existed. No, I don't. Where's your evidence? Not your claims, not your stupid scholarly consensus. Evidence. Where is the evidence that the experts used to prove that Jesus was ever real? Trot that one out for me and then we'll talk. They can never do it. Not once, not ever. And that seems kind of strange, doesn't it? Almost like they're covering up for something. And if you ask the religious why they can't do it, that's when the excuses start to flow. You never get, hey, you know something? You're right. I need evidence. Let me go find some. Nope, that never happens. It's all excuses all the way down. Don't let them get away with it. Until there is demonstrable evidence for a real historical Jesus, and keep in mind, that gets them absolutely nowhere close to the magical man God that they believe in, then I have no reason to accept that thing is true. You have to meet a burden of proof, even a really low one, like just showing that a real individual existed in history. And they simply can't do it. I'm not impressed with this, and I don't know why anyone else is either.
I said, well, yeah. He said, why do you believe that?
That's a good question, isn't it? Too bad Mike won't have a good answer. Or, since I haven't seen it, I doubt that Mike will have a good answer based on talking to these people for decades of my life and not one of them ever having a good answer for anything yet. Because that's really the problem, isn't it? I get that their standard of evidence is pathetically low, but mine isn't. I don't accept claims about reality that can't be backed up in reality, and I have no respect for anyone who does. Now, they don't have to care about my respect any more than I have to care about theirs, but you're talking to me, you have to meet my standards, just like if I was talking to you, I'd have to meet yours. Maybe that explains why they really don't want to talk to us. We ask too many difficult questions that they have no intelligent answers for. Let me know down in the comments if you agree with that, and let's move on.
I said, well, Doc, you have what you call the minimal facts approach. You take facts that are so strongly supported by the data.
No, he doesn't. Because he doesn't even look at the data. He goes around and asks if other people agree with them. Welcome to Argumentum ad Populum. It doesn't matter if people agree, that's a fallacy. It matters if the data supports the conclusion, and Gary is entirely ignorant of the data. His standards for confirmation are pathetically low. Well, the only thing that he ever tries to confirm are his own biases, and that's not a good thing. So you've got Mike Licona, who takes all this stuff on faith, asking Gary Habermas, who takes all this stuff on faith, if he should keep having faith. Well, what the hell do you think Gary's going to say? He's certainly not saying, well, let's look at the facts, because he doesn't understand the facts. He doesn't care about the facts. No, he's just trying to get Mike to assert more faith. I wonder what would happen if Mike hadn't wholeheartedly agreed. That might have been a very different conversation.
That the overwhelming majority of critical scholars grant them as facts.
Backed up by nothing at all tangible. That's why you get a lot of theists who, when they get backed into a corner, they can only say, but the experts say. So what? Show me their evidence that they must have had when coming to these conclusions rationally. Where is that? They don't have any. This is all just fallacy. Not only are they engaging in argumentum ad populum, but they're just throwing in an appeal to authority to boot. The authority doesn't matter. It's how they can prove that they've earned their authority that does. And funny, they can never do that, can they? They will often just appeal to a lower standard of evidence. Well, that's how we do it. Well, I don't give a shit about you. I care about being convinced myself, and nothing that you can present convinces me. You should have better than you do. And they don't happen to like that very much, right? Who cares?
And you can take just those facts and build a very strong case for the resurrection of Jesus. And so, yeah, you do that, and it's like, all right, yeah, Jesus rose from the dead.
Except you can't. First off, there are no facts. The more that we look into this, the less of a foundation Christianity actually has. You have no external demonstrable evidence for a real Jesus. What you want to be true doesn't matter. I need to see the receipts. Then they just leap to, therefore God, or whatever, because they have to ignore all the other more rational explanations, even if they could prove that Jesus was real and any of the minimal facts were actually true. Demonstrably true, I mean. At best, you'd have a guy who got crucified by the Romans and his body disappears. Well, you can't just leap to, he came back from the dead. There's a whole lot of steps in there that you have to fill in with evidence, and you can't. You just can't. Even if we grant any of that, which I don't, it's still a lot more plausible that somebody stole the body, or that there was no body to steal in the first place, since we know that the Romans just threw crucifixion victims into mass graves in virtually all instances. In fact, in the single example that we have of a crucified man being buried, we know nothing at all about the circumstances that surrounded it. It's all just made up, and the religious are running downfield with the goalposts strapped to their backs, and we need to put a stop to that. They've got nothing. Nothing at all. This is all just stupid.
Mike, we've got, evidence that, there's some evidence that the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John wrote the Gospels.
No, you don't. You have beliefs. You have faith. You don't have evidence because you can't even prove that these people existed in the first place. Again, no independent evidence for anything. But you notice what he said, right? We've got evidence. Some evidence. Nothing strong or anything, but you've got crap that you can just make claims about that falls apart entirely without your blind faith. Your beliefs don't matter. Only the facts do, taken as direct evidence and not filtered through your, but I really, really want it to be true. We know that the Gospels were written anonymously, and they do not bear the hallmarks of eyewitness testimony. Eyewitnesses don't need to copy off each other like the Gospel writers did. we know that none of them identified themselves and that the names were never even attached to the Gospels until the 2nd century, most likely by Papias. We have early church fathers in the 2nd century like Ignatius and Polycarp that quoted the Gospels, but they never referred to them by name. You also have to remember that Papias wasn't well regarded for his honesty. There are other early church fathers that said, don't listen to him. So we've got no evidence for any of that, and if Mike thinks he does, leaving his faith completely out of it, I'd love to see it presented. Somehow, I figure we're only going to get crickets, because what the hell else is new?
But let's just say for the sake of argument, we're wrong. If Jesus rose, is Christianity still true? I said, well, of course.
But you have no independent confirmation for that. You'll see the religious asking a lot of if questions, right? But as we all know, if is not because. Just because you really like an idea, that doesn't mean it actually happened that way. You need to establish that first, and they're not even trying. Why? Because they're desperate to get back to their pre-existing beliefs, and I'm not. I don't care what's true, I only want to know that it actually is true. That's why I settle for nothing but solid, demonstrable, verifiable evidence, and the religious don't have any. They just desperately want to believe because that's what makes them happy. But that's not a rational way to get to the truth, is it?
He said, well, then why are you allowing this matter of gospel authorship to rock your faith?
Because you shouldn't have faith at all. Faith is not a rational path to demonstrable truth. You have to ask all these questions, and if you don't, then you're not exercising critical thinking, but wishful thinking. Because if you don't know who wrote the Gospels, if you don't have good reason, a defensible reason, to think that they had some accurate information recorded factually, then why should you believe any of it at all? Because it certainly looks like anonymous non-eyewitness authors that just took the output of a decades-long game of telephone, applied their own personal agendas and biases, and then just wrote it down as a method of converting others. It wasn't there to relate history. It was there to make more Christians. And unfortunately, we all know that honesty is not needed for that. So this is all just bullshit.
That's a good question. And so I said, I understand that. But what do you do with the errors and contradictions that they're saying in the Gospels? And he said, Mike, did Jesus rise from the dead?
Still no evidence to support it or anything, but you notice what Gary's doing here, right? He's making excuses and trying to distract Mike from the actual questions at hand. This is also a very common apologetic tactic, and Mike fell for it hook, line, and sinker. Mike really isn't all that bright in that regard, is he? Most of them aren't. He was so desperate to believe that he stopped asking the questions that might have led him out of the faith, whereas when I was asking questions, I didn't let anyone get in my way of my search for the truth. That's why I'm not a Christian, and he is. Mike is gullible in a way that I simply can't be because I am intellectually honest and dedicated to finding the facts, faith be damned. That's where the religious run into problems, and that's nothing to be proud of.
And then, Mike, we got answers to some of those, but even if we're wrong, if Jesus rose, Christianity is still true. We might have to rework some of our doctrine of Scripture, like inerrancy or something like that, but it doesn't negate the credibility or truth of Christianity.
Except that's all predicated on something that you can't prove ever happened in the first place. This is just, do you have faith in this thing you can't prove? And go ahead and just believe. Mike got bamboozled, and that's hardly a surprise. This is a really good example of how religion operates, not just Christianity, but virtually all religions do it. Start with something that the person has an emotional attachment to and stress that. Tell them to ignore all the problems with holding that belief. If becomes because. That's always how this works. It's fast talk and fee-fees, and that is not rational. If you can just cling to this one thing irrationally, everything else falls into place because that one thing, true or not, becomes your anchor. It doesn't matter if it's true or not if you're willing to lie to yourself about it and look past all the other issues. That's religion for you. Pathetic, huh?
So that was a relief for you having him walk you through that mental process, if you will.
No, he got lied to and brainwashed. That's what happened. And now Mike Licona is lying to and brainwashing others. I'm not sure where this is supposed to be a good thing. He's become another con man, just like Gary Habermas, just like Frank Turek, just like William Lane Craig, and many, many others. They all do it, and they all do it in similar ways. Just believe this thing and stop asking questions. No, I refuse. I am always going to have questions about everything, and I'm always going to seek independent corroboration because the people who believe it don't matter. It's the facts that mean something, not the fee-fees. That's what makes me a poor candidate for Christianity, because I don't believe you and I do not have faith. I will never do faith for anything, and without that, the religious mind poison, it just can't take hold. And I think that's a very good thing.
And it sort of freed you up to be free to avoid some of those obstacles and to focus on, more specifics here about these differences and looking into them.
That's right. Because no matter what conclusion I came to, I might make some evangelicals mad. I have. Because I'm just trying to be honest with this. I'm not trying to toe a party line.
Says the guy with the binding statement of faith. But if you just listen to what he's saying, it's very easy to see where he's going wrong. It doesn't matter what I do so long as I accept this one thing uncritically. Well, why is that a good thing? Explain that if you would. Now, granted, belief is not beholden to the will. You can't just choose what you will or will not believe. But if your mental state is so painfully out of whack that you'll believe some things uncritically just because they make you feel good, then you've got some serious problems upstairs. A lot of people do, at least in my opinion. A lot of people are willing to throw away their cognitive honesty for emotional comfort, and I find that utterly pathetic. How about you?
If Jesus rose, it's game, set, match. Christianity is true, period.
But you haven't established that Jesus ever rose from the dead. That's a statement of faith, not a statement of demonstrable fact. If is not because. You don't get to pull that. Yet the religious rely on it, right? A lot of people do. Just because it makes you really happy, that doesn't make it true. I could say, if I had $100 trillion, million, billion, trillion, billion, million dollars in my bank account, then whatever. Fill in the blank. It really doesn't matter. But I don't have $100 trillion in my bank account. Nobody does. Current estimates put the amount of money that exists on the entire planet somewhere around 48.9 trillion. So saying, what if, for something that has not been established to be true, that doesn't matter, does it? What you wish is irrelevant. What is actually true matters.
And so I can feel freedom to look at this stuff. And, we should anyway, because we should be more interested in truth than verifying our own views.
I agree. It just doesn't work that way for the religious, and to be honest, for most other people as well. People generally want to be right, but they're also lazy, and challenging their preconceptions is difficult and painful, and therefore most people just don't do it. They make excuses for why they can't do it, just like Gary Habermas was doing, and Mike fell for it hook, line, and sinker, didn't he? Now he's doing the same thing to other people, pushing the same narrative on others and trying to make a buck off the religiously gullible. Because you notice that book never got put down, did it? That's all this video exists to do. Make money for Mike Licona. But Mike doesn't actually want to find the truth, because that would require putting away cherished beliefs and challenging them on a fundamental level, and he refuses to do that. The overwhelming majority of theists do, and the ones that can, they don't tend to remain theists for very long, do they? Because their beliefs don't stand up to any kind of critical scrutiny. You have to do away with the faith. And it's really too bad that Mike can't.
So, yeah.
Great. Well, if you also have questions about the reliability of the Gospels and why there are differences between the Gospels, check out Mike's new book, Jesus Contradicted: Why the Gospels Tell the Same Story Differently, published by Zondervan Academic.
And we're going to leave it right there. Now, who knows, I might pick up Mike's book if I can find it cheap someplace or something. That's how I have a whole library of religious apologetic books, after all. I'm not afraid to read the opposition. I have not found anything worthwhile in any of them, sadly, but that's because I can see through the faith talk and find that their emperor has no clothes. It's just what they want to be true, not what they can objectively demonstrate actually is. And so long as that's the case, I don't see myself ever going back to any religion. I require that corroboratory evidence, and they simply don't have any, and they don't seem to notice where they're going wrong. And that's kind of sad, isn't it? But anyway, what do you think? Let me know down in the comments below. I don't tend to do a lot of Mike Licona just because of that binding statement of faith. I don't see where he has any credibility at all. And the same goes for all apologists, although not all of them sign a piece of paper promising never to ask the wrong questions, but some do, don't they? That's kind of stupid. Some of them are just delusional and they're going to believe it no matter what happens. What they believe just has to be true, and this video proves it. This is why I can't take any of these people seriously. But isn't your blind faith position true? If that was me, I'd say, I don't know. Let's go find out. But they can't do that, can they? They just have to believe, and that, my friends, is absolutely pathetic. Don't be like these people. You have to be a whole lot better.